The fact that once you generate a lot of mana, it gains a bunch of life and pulls you out of range for aggressive decks. I was watching the Green White Devotion deck in action the other day, where it's just facing down Stormbreath Dragons and Ash Cloud Phoenix. Traditionally very hard threats for Green Devotion to answer, but was able to ignore it altogether by just going deep into Mastery Unseen and gaining a bunch of life.
Game number 1 of round 3 is underway here between Braunduin and Fogel. BBD starts off with an Elvish Mystic. Now he's got a Temple of Plenty. Well, Scry, a little bit of an attack here. You saw Fogel to start off with a Temple. Again, remember. Yes, sir. Here's a Thoughtseize from Jack. We can't forget. It's weird to say. This guy just won a Grand Prix.
Yes.
He just won a Grand Prix. With this deck. You see a Thoughtseize here, Banishing Light, Master of the Unseen, 2 of those, along with the Genesis Hydra and a Whisperwood Elemental. So if Jack didn't know what Brian was up to before, he certainly does now. Or at least have a better idea. Again, this Green-White Devotion deck, it's not a stock deck yet. You know, this is a deck that's starting to pick up a little bit. This is looking to be, if things go right for a handful of players playing this deck, the breakout of the tournament.
Yeah, there's a couple touches of white in this deck. You see a couple of them here, Mastery, then see Banishing Light. Fleecemane Lion also in this deck has something good to do early on in the game, and once you have a lot of mana, the Monstrous is very easy to achieve as well.
So we'll see if Fogel does want to select.
Now, one of the incentives to play Sultai instead of Abzan, the card Mastery of Unseen, you can actually remove it with Sultai Charm. Abzan decks struggle much more to get it off the table.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you see a stray Utter End in some of those lists, but by and large, enchantments go unchecked.
There goes Genesis Hydra. Here's a Temple of Deceit. Top card going to become the bottom card as we head back BBD's way. Brian will draw. Copy of Elvish Mystic. He'll deploy the Mystic. There's a Mastery. Pass the turn back, hoping Jack doesn't have a Bioblight.
Yeah, this is pretty scary here if you're in Brian's spot, but he can't just hold the Elvish Mystic back while he's missing land drops, so he will just cross his fingers and hope that Bioblight is not at the ready on Jack's side.
Fogel does have a land to play in Pluto Delta. So we'll see how he wants to move forward on this turn. There is the Delta. He's just passing the turn back, so no Bioblight action here. Braunduin will draw. Copy of Whisperwood Elemental. Speaking with him yesterday, he said, card is completely busted.
Yep.
Jack gonna sacrifice his Pluto Delta. He's down to 16.
The whole SCG squad very high on this card.
Yep. There is an island. See if Fogel has any effects here. Perhaps the Sultai Charm. Hero's Downfall is going to go after an Elvish Mystic.
And you may wonder why Jack didn't main phase that downfall. This is one of those spots where if Brian hits a land drop and plays something big, he wants the ability to answer the big thing. And if Brian misses his land drop, he's going to go after the mana.
Oh, Bioblight the draw here.
Perfect.
Just how we drew it up.
One turn late. Maybe just ending the game before it even starts.
Here's a Temple. Take a look at the top card. That one's going to the bottom too. And now here's Ashiok. Elevator going up, of course, which means 3 cards will be turned over, a Windswept Teeth, a Courser, and a Plains. All those cards are exiled. A Courser, of course, placed underneath the Ashiok, because that's a card that Ashiok can return. Braunduin will draw. Copy of Voyaging Satyr. Some real mana issues here for Brian this game. There's a Banishing Light to take care of Ashiok, however. And now the Manifest will come across for 2. Fogel's going to go down to 14.
An alternative line of play that Brian had access to that turn, he could have attacked the Ashiok down to 2 and then played his Voyaging Satyr, but pretty risky to let Ashiok go unchecked, especially since Jack could follow up potentially with Crux of Fate, and that would probably be game over.
Most likely. There's Yav Maya Coast. Pass that turn back. Brian will untap and draw. Pelucranos, the draw, still not a land. Still has those mana issues. Pretty simple attack for 3 here. The follow-up is that Voyaging Satyr, you have to imagine. There it is. Fogel will take a look at his hand. It's time for a dig through time. So take a look at the top 7. He'll take 2 with him.
Of course, a lot of very big cards to find here on Jack's side. Most importantly, Crux of Fate. That's the big one here.
Garruk Apex Predator among the cards he's looking at right now. Jack's Planeswalker suite, he does have 2 Ashiok's, 2 Kioras, 2 Ugins, and then the 1 Garruk. Creatures, of course, just the 4 Satyr Wayfinders and a whole bunch of spells. Gerard Fabiano, he laid the foundation.
Yep.
And he's here this weekend. You have to imagine doing this too.
I would have to guess.
Yeah.
Sultai something or other.
His specialty across many formats.
Standard, Legacy, Modern.
That's what he does. There's a Temple of Mystery. Take a look at that top card. That one goes to the bottom as well. Fogel does have Bioblight ready. He's going to play 2 spells. He says Bioblight here, Sultai Charm there, stunt your mana. You can have that manifest creature. I don't care.
Exactly. Jack can just get to one of his powerful Planeswalkers on a stable board with Brian having no mana to defend himself. Should not be hard to wrap up the rest of the game.
There's an attack for 2. Brian going to follow up with another copy Mastery of the Unseen, pass the turn back.
That is an issue with Mastery of Unseen. There is huge diminishing returns on the card unless the life gain power is especially good for you in the matchup. And usually when you're doing it for the 1 life gain, the second one you don't really need.
Yeah.
And they are playing 4 copies, so this is going to come up.
5 mana, Treasure Cruise. 3 cards coming here. Urborg among them, so a land is not an issue here for Fogel. He'll play that, he'll pass the turn back over to Braunduin. Braunduin will draw. Oh, he's finding lands now. They're a little late to the party, though. Bioblight will take care of them more, for at least try to. Could be a Pelucranos. That's a Whisperwood Elemental.
You can tell with Jack's hand, he's happy if Brian spent his whole turn unmorphing there.
Yeah. Brian just going to pass the turn back, looking to likely manifest here. Fogel's draw step was an Ugin. As far as Jack's Delve cards are concerned, 4 Dig Through Time, that won't surprise anybody. Just 1 copy of Treasure Cruise. We've seen lists that do play 2 sometimes.
Right, we see definitely beyond the 4 copies of Dig Through Time, and then 1 to 2 Treasure Cruises.
Garruk said, you have to imagine a Black Beast will be joining it in just a moment. So that 3/3 will have Death Touch. There's Brian's Manifest creature. There's a Black Beast. Maybe. Yep, there it is.
There we go.
Two mana here for Brian. There's a Voyaging Satyr. All you can do is pass the turn back. This Green White Devotion deck doesn't ever want to be placed in this situation. Very hard to come back.
Right, it needs some sort of huge mana cheat, and that's just going to be impossible for Brian to generate in the face of these Planeswalkers. This board's going to get swallowed up here. And Jack can just continue to play the pin your mana game with your removal spells. Plus Garruk a bunch, or minus as appropriate, wait to get to Ugin.
Well, the Grand Prix Memphis champion will think things through here. As Garruk does go up. Looks like it's time for another Black Beast. Fogel's the one with all the options here.
I feel like using a Sultai Charm or a Downfall on the Voyaging Satyr here and just keep the mana stunted is fine. Although, you know, Jack's in this spot right now. We see it a bunch of times where the control deck basically can't lose. He's got the game almost locked up, and he just wants to make sure nothing sloppy happens. So you see people actually get super cautious in spots like this just to prevent anything from slipping through the cracks.
Brian gains 4 life there. Unmoore's Fleetbane line. 2 Master of the Unseens, 2 creatures in play. 2 times 2.
It's 4.
That is 4. We're good at math here in the booth, which means Brian goes up to 24.
Just firing on all cylinders.
We got it early today.
Yeah.
Nykthos comes down.
It's good we got a lot of standard to cover, so we got to be sharp soon.
Nykthos actually generating more white than green
Yeah.
in this situation. Oh, Brian wants to take a look at Garrick. That's never a good idea.
A white devotion strategy. Perhaps Heliod will be showing up to the party momentarily.
Well, Brian is pretty fond of Heliod.
Oh, yeah.
And his spear.
Oh, I can definitely get behind Heliod's spear. That card is super good.
Three mana here for Jack. He's going to play Sultai Charm.
Not a good sign if you're in Brian's spot right here. Jack could have killed your Voyaging Satyr and said, I'm all right.
Decline.
You keep it.
Respectfully. Here's Dig Through Time as well. Jeez. That was a pretty good turn.
Also, bad news is Jack saying, you have a window right now to go monsters through your Fleece main line. I'm tapped out. Go ahead.
Feel free.
Doesn't matter.
He does not mind. So Jack gets to see a lot of cards this turn. And what makes this Sultai control deck so scary is that it just uses its graveyard as an extension of its hand.
It's incredible how efficient it is with delving. When we talk, delves coming back into standard, what are the implications of this? And the first thing that nearly every respected pro had to say was the delve cards are on diminishing returns. The first one's super, super good. And past that, they become harder and harder to facilitate, which is true in the abstract. But with Polluted Delta, Sultai Charm, Sylvan Wayfinder, this deck's able to play 6 delve card drawing spells alongside Tassiger and Murderous Cut.
Well, back Fogel's way we go. Perhaps he's just looking for land number 8 for Ugin.
Or, more kill spells, or looks like he's taking an insurance Ugin just in case.
Yep.
Fine, too.
For when one Ugin's not good enough.
Right. You never know. Best not to risk it.
True. Jack going to reorganize his mana a little bit here. Looks like he'll be Sultai Charming again.
Yep.
Draw 2 and discard 1.
Oh, you have a board with Voyaging Satyr and multiple enchantments? All right, I'll draw 2 and discard 1.
No big deal. Discard to Swamp, plays Llanowar Waste. Garrick will tick up. It's up to 8. There's another beast. Here's a Nykthos activation. Oh, look at Brian's getting a little crafty here. More mana. Mastery. Mastery. 2 manifest. Does Fogel let him untap? He does.
Yeah, so far none of this warrants a response.
So these two will play on. Even though it feels like Jack Fogel is very far ahead in this game, he is an 8. Brian's 24, starting to find some lands.
Might see some more cards, and the cat's kind of out of the bag on what Brian's playing at this point, so I think that if you ask Brian, what do you think your odds are of winning this game, he would say less than 1%, but at least worth playing on.
Yeah. And those manifest creatures make things so interesting because Ugin can't take care of them.
They are pretty well contained by Garrick in multiple ways, unfortunately.
This is true. Temple of Plenty gonna leave that card on top. Brian is thinking, though. He's trying to climb himself back into this game. Does have mana available to rock and roll Fleece main line. We saw 2 Mastery of the Unseen activations last turn. He could do that again this turn.
Well, the thing is, the Master of the Unseens are approximately as good as just playing the threats out of his hand right now. You can't really attack with anything through these Death Touch creatures. So the best case scenario for Brian is probably just to sit behind Master of the Unseen, generate a bunch of stuff, maybe get to a position where he can start attacking. If Jack is forced to Crux of Fate or use some other sweeper, well, now you have some creatures left over in your hand to try to rebuild with. So I like what Brian's doing here. Again, I think it's a long shot, but casting the cards in his hand right now just doesn't really get him anywhere.
He's giving this turn a lot of thought. Is the two-time Grand Prix champion. Looks like he might just be passing the turn back. Fogel going to use a Hero's Downfall to take care of a Manifest creature. Looking to create an opening here for Ugin. Brian a little sloppy. Don't think he showed that card to Jack, though.
And right now, Brian's just trying to figure out, what's Jack setting up here, because Jack has gone out of his way to not use the Soul-Side Charms as removal spells when there's been some pretty good opportunities to do so. So you have to get a sense of what is Jack trying to play towards right now.
It does feel a little strange. That creature was a Courser. Go back Fogel's way. He'll draw a card. Time to make a move. The beasts are coming in. And Brian looks like he's just going to take this 9 points of damage.
And this is a play that signals Ugin.
Mm-hmm. And there's the Spirit Dragon. Starts at 7. They're going to go down to 4, which means the activation's for 3. What this will allow him to do is kill the Banishing Light, too, to get Ashiok back. So Brian's going to be floating some mana here. And he's going to activate Master of the Unseen twice, so that he can get 2 Manifest creatures, which Ugin cannot take care of.
But Garrick's still at the ready here.
Garrick has not been activated yet this turn. Ashiok's about to be. That'll turn over 3 cards. Whisperwood Elemental and Elvish Mystic. Go with Ashiok. The Temple of Plenty is exiled. There's a beast. That'll be Fogel's turn. Nice job of resetting the board there for Jack.
Though at 8 with only 1 blocker, I think the only 5 power creatures in the deck are Polukranos, and you can't unmorph 2 of them. But with 2 4-power creatures, it's not impossible. I think mana may be the bottleneck in any case.
I think so.
But Brian's got Boon Satyrs in his sideboard. There are spots this deck can get into where he could kill from here.
It is certainly not out of the question. This entire time, even though Jack's the one with a Garrick and an Ugin and an Ashiok, it hasn't felt like he's had the stranglehold in this game.
Yep.
And Brian's the one having mana issues, too.
Right. A lot of credit goes to Brian for, it was looking fairly helpless. He's playing this out, and I think his use of Mastery of the Unseen here was excellent.
Yeah.
In a spot where not a lot to be gained by casting the cards out of your hand. Now he's still got stuff to work in his hand to work with if he wants to. He's still at risk of getting overpowered in this game for sure. He's done a very good job of at least making the game competitive in a spot where it looked like that might not necessarily be the case.
I think now Brian's trying to decide, what do I attack if I'm going to attack anything? For example, Ugin is at 4 right now, so he could finish it off. He'd have to lose one of those Manifest creatures, but might be okay with that exchange.
Well, I'm just not sure how much he cares about the Ugin if his plan is just to manifest as much as possible. Maybe he just gets off the table because it's so powerful. It looks like that's what he's doing, but...
Polukranos was the creature. Now it looks like he's going to go the Whisperwood route, and he will, which means the Manifest creature will be joining the party yet again. Pass the turn back, so he's got a lot of life in this game. I think a little bit more than we expected, but we can't forget that Jack Fogel does have a lot of cards in his hand.
Yeah, there's still resources to work with there, but that was a pretty scary turn for Jack because he's been in such a commanding position the entire game, and it wasn't inconceivable for him to die on that turn.
Mm-hmm. The old beast attack.
Mm-hmm.
Give you a little look. Five mana. Is it Crux time? Yes, sir. Sacrifice that. Won't play much of a role here. We'll see what these creatures are. Carry added, couple of lands, nothing too crazy. And now Fogel's going to cash in the S shot to get a Whisper Elemental, get a Beast token.
Soul's Charm and Disdainful Stroke still at the ready. Hero's Downfall. I think we've reached the point of no return here from Brian's side.
Brian draws the cards, copy Master of the Unseen. And Brian's going to scoop it up. Jack Fogel's going to win game number 1 here over Brian Braun-Duin. Sultai Control up a game here over Green White Devotion as these two Grand Prix champions battle each other here in round number 3. We're going to move to the sideboards, and we will start with BBD. And you mentioned the Boon Satyrs in his board. I imagine those will be pretty good here.
3 copies of Boon Satyr, 4 copies of Valorous Stance, 2 Reclamation Sage, 2 copies of Glare of Heresy, 2 copies of Nissa Worldwaker, and 2 High Sentinels of Arashin. Draft Superstar, another pretty good devotion payout here. I think the 3 copies of Boon Satyr will be coming in. I think the 2 copies of Nissa. Valorous Stance is a little narrow for this matchup, but it can fizzle some removal spells. Also get Tassiger off the table in case Jack boards it in.
Let's take a look at Jack's side of things. You'll find 3 Tasker the Golden Fang, 3 Pharika's Cures, 2 Drown in Sorrow, 2 Negate, a Disdainful Stroke, a Thoughtseize, 2 Rashasha Death Dealer, and an additional copy of Crux of Fate.
I like the Crux of Fate a lot in this matchup. I think the 2 copies of Drown in Sorrow is reasonable to bring in and try to pin Brian's mana. Also, not a long-term answer to Mastery of the Unseen, but it can at least set back Brian if he's developed a lot of morphs. The 3 copies of Tassiger don't feel great to me in this matchup, but Tassiger is so powerful in post-board games in general that it may just come in.
Well, game number 2 we're going to be underway between these 2 great players in just a moment, but we will talk about a Dragons of Tarkir spoiler. Impulse is a card that I think you know better than most. I know most people don't put you on blue strategies, but I think this was a point in time you were casting that card, and this is, I guess, the newer version, not as great, but Impulse was a great card.
Right, and I mean, this is, again, for the decks that are playing with cards like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise, when you have low-cost cards that, spells that are just kind of fine on their own, that you can play in your graveyard early to facilitate earlier delve spells, cards like this slot in pretty naturally. I think if something like Serum Visions was legal and standard, it would be all over the place. This card probably is not quite as good as that on the balance, but for standard level play, probably still good enough to play.
We think this is happening across multiple formats, maybe just a standard card?
Probably just a standard card, okay. I would imagine. In something like Modern, Telling Time's been a fringe player here and there. This card is pretty close. I mean, some spots Telling Time's better, some spots this is better. But I think this will show up in some standard decks. As long as Delve's around, cards like this just kind of slot in pretty naturally.
I'm a big fan of the artwork here.
Yeah. Also, a lot of these control decks just don't have anything to do on turn 2. They're holding up Bile Blight or they're saying go.
Yeah.
Because you don't have something like Mana Leak that just checks everything. Disdainful Stroke, that doesn't work on the second turn. Negate may or may not work. And so having some ways to just fill in your mana could be nice for some of those decks.
Thankfully, we don't have Mana Leak.
Yeah, thankfully. I like just spells resolving as a thing.
I'm a big fan of that.
Right. Just, I play my stuff and you play your stuff, and then we just sort of sort it out as we go.
Well, there's new Impulse. It is Anticipate. And I imagine we'll see quite a bit of play while it is in standard. As both these players do get ready for game number 2. Again, Jack Vogel coming off of a win at Grand Prix Memphis just a couple weeks ago. And then Brian Braun-Duin, well, he's a 2-time Grand Prix champion. His first Grand Prix win was in Louisville a couple of years ago with Mono Black Devotion. And then, of course, last year, Grand Prix New Jersey, one of the largest Grand Prix of all time. He was a champion, beating Tom Ross in the finals. BBD getting it done with a Jeskai Stoneblade deck at that tournament.
A player who's just really, busted his hump the last couple of years, building decks, playing in tournaments, improving his game, and has gone from, PTQ grinder to 2-time Grand Prix champion and someone who's qualified for the next several Pro Tours. It's great to get to watch the sort of the arc of someone go from a person sort of hanging around the tournaments and waiting to break through to someone who's broken through and is likely just here to stay.
Jack Fogel's a name that I imagine, after his Grand Prix Memphis one, I think people are familiar with. But before that, I remember an Open Series Invitational in Los Angeles many moons ago, won by Reed Duke. And, we were covering a Legacy Open that Jack won. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of doing a roll call on, okay, here are the people who won the tournaments. We've got, Reed Duke won the Invitational, and this person won the Standard Open, and our Legacy Open champion, Jack Vogel, and our Draft Open champion is John Vogel. And I remember Jack coming over to me, and he's like, yeah, my middle name's John, that's me. I won both those tournaments. I'm like, I'm sorry, Jack. So Jack won 2 tournaments that weekend. It was really embarrassing, but also just really funny. He's like, no, I won 2. I really wanted to hear you guys say that I won 2. I'm like, I'm sorry. But he's got a Grand Prix title underneath his belt, and if he wins this one, we'll make sure we get it right.
Right.
Game number 2 underway. Elvish Mystic, just like last time here for Brian. A Temple of Malady, very reminiscent of what Jack did on his first turn of the game. We'll head back BBD's way. Temple of Plenty the draw. We play a copy of Manic Influence, come across here for 1. And there's a Fleeceman line, so immediately putting Fulgo under the gun.
And this is kind of a nice setup here for Brian, because often these devotion decks go set up, set up, set up, set up, here's my big play, and something like Crux of Fate can, or even just a Dissolve, can blow the whole thing up. This puts pressure on Jack to have removal spells early on in the game, and if Jack passes that test, Brian can transition into playing his 4 and 5 mana spells.
Fleeceman, Elvish Mystic come across. Brian off to an aggressive start while Fulgo is playing the lands that enter the battlefield tapped. Now there is a Master of the Unseen. So this is a great start here for Brian.
This is also awesome. It's just something he can add to the board right now that doesn't push him further into sweepers. Right now, Drowned in Sorrow does nothing, or very close to nothing. It's a very good, diverse opening here from Brian, putting Jack under pressure from multiple different angles.
Fulgo going to play a Polluted Delta. He'll sacrifice that. Pay a life, go down to 14. We have a Swamp or an Island coming here in just a moment. It will be an Island. So all 3 colors of mana out there for Jack. And let's see what spell he wants to play. You mentioned Drowned in Sorrow, not going to have much of an impact right now. However, he will cast it just to take care of the Elvish Mystic and the opportunity to scry.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get much better from here, so.
Not the prettiest play I've ever seen. There are some draws against Brian's deck where Drowned in Sorrow will be great. This is just not one of them. Fleeceman line's going to come into the red zone yet again.
Fleeceman doing some real work here.
Absolutely. This was the breakout for a lot of players at Grand Prix Memphis when they had in their sideboard of the Abzan deck. Players didn't really see that coming. Now Brian's starting that card.
And this is Brian's first, not good turn of the game.
Yeah.
I think that if he had untapped land number 4 and could just pass the turn back, activate Mastery on the Scene, he would keep up the pressure. Now he's falling a little bit behind if Jack has 1 piece of removal.
The reason for the pause in gameplay is Brian played a Temple, went to go look at his top card to scry, saw the second card down on accident, as cards do stick together on occasion, and immediately called a judge on himself to let him know exactly what happened so he can have an accurate game here. So.
Yeah, back during our competitive peaks, I believe this would have been a disqualification from the tournament plus a DCI investigation.
Correct.
Now they just will correct the deck and move on with life.
Before, you would be thrown out, and then as you walked out of the hall, you'd be hit in the face by a snowball.
Right.
But not any longer.
Behind, little known fact, behind the judging tables, they would have a basket of rotten tomatoes. And if you accidentally looked at the top card of your deck, you would just be hurled.
Yeah. A different game.
Yeah, it was just a different time.
Yeah.
Now, you shuffle the deck and we're good to go.
An apology, a smile, a marking on the match slip, and we keep going.
Right. I like this world better.
I actually prefer the tomato route.
You like the rotten tomato route?
Because it really teaches you a lesson. You don't want that to happen.
I don't know how much it matters to be teaching lessons at Magic tournaments. I don't know. That rate's pretty low on my priorities.
Hero's Downfall going to take care of Fleeceman Lion. See what Brian has now. Jack's starting to stabilize a little bit here. And there's a Polukranos, so going to put a big 5/5 on the table and make Fulgo answer that. Could have went the Master of the Unseen route, but decided to play the 5/5.
Well, Jack can overpower the morphs at this point. A steady stream of morphs, Jack's transitioning to the point where he's going to be able to get to something like Garruk pretty soon. On top of that, you've seen Drowned in Sorrow, so there's a risk with leaning on that too much. I think Brian wants to just deploy the big stuff in his hand, hope that Jack maybe can't answer it, and then switch to Mastery of the Unseen after he's baited out some of Jack's removal spells.
Sultai Charm will take care of that. There's an Opulent Palace and a passing the turn. What I think makes what makes it so tough to play against this control deck is it's kind of like a ticking time bomb, right? The longer the game goes, the closer you get to just some unbeatable Planeswalker.
Right, and that's why it's really risky to be on Mastery of the Unseen exclusively as your plan. Back in the day, the old draw-go style control decks would really struggle just to beat a stream of 2/2s. Now they get to some end game, some big creature or some Planeswalker where they can invalidate a lot of that kind of stuff. So you do have to find a way to split the difference between being too exposed to sweepers and also applying enough pressure where you can win the game before some big planeswalker shows up.
You saw Fogel's draw step last turn was a copy of Ugin.
I think Brian just got away with cheating again, knocking over the top card of his deck.
Tomatoes here in a moment. There's a dig through time.
It's actually a trap door, a trap floor, and it just opens you up and swallows you into the depths of the convention center.
No telling what's down there. So it's a good time for Jack to resolve a dig through time. He'll look at 7, take 2 with him. The other 5 will go on the bottom, so he's happy with what he's found. Now he'll take a draw step. Blue to Delta, you see a Garruk Apex Predator in hand too.
And that's what we were talking about. You know, you can only go so long with these control decks now, unless you have something that can overpower things like Garruk and Ugin. That's not easy to do.
See the Pluto Delta tap for mana thanks to Urborg. Here's another manifest creature. But now Brian's got to try to overcome this situation again. The Unmorph now, he wants to Unmorph the Elvish Mystic right away. He's going to gain 4 life from this.
Yeah, Brian's not in a position to attack next turn regardless, so might as well get some more mana into play.
Well, the reason for that is because one of the cards he has in his hand right now is a copy of Genesis Hydra, and he wants more mana for that to be able to make a big one and find something nice.
Banishing Light would certainly play in this spot.
Absolutely it would. The question, if you're Brian, is what else does Jack have in his hand? Can I beat whatever else he has? Am I able to overcome 8th land plus Ugin, for example? Brian just going to pass the turn back. Has the ability now with 8 mana in play to activate Master of the Unseen twice.
And I think that's kind of the spot that Brian's trying to set up here. With Master of the Unseen generating 2 tokens versus Garruk 1, he can eventually outpace it. Also, if he keeps generating manifest tokens to take some of the sting out of Ugin, it's still going to be hard to win against that tandem of cards anyway. You know, we saw that last game, but as we also saw last game, Brian came kind of close to winning that game in spite of how badly it was going for him.
Absolutely. So now it's on Fogel to see if he can figure out a way to beat these Master of the Unseen creatures. He's got a lot of good cards in his hand at this point. Just got to deploy them in the proper order, hopefully get them out in time. If he does that, it'll be a victory for him.
He's gotten to the spot where he wants to. As Garruk can play, he's got Ugin in hand, he's got Crux of Fate in hand. These are the same tools we saw last game where he eventually locked it up even through Mastery of the Unseen. It's just sequencing that's the concern right now.
He's going to start by attacking with the beast. Brian, no interest in blocking. He'll take that right away. There's a swamp. 8 mana, this is familiar. There's Ugin. He'll set it down. That means the Mastery of the Unseen will be destroyed, along with the Elvish Mystic. But Brian's going to take the opportunity right now to activate Master of the Unseen twice, which means he'll get 2 manifest creatures. Of course, Ugin can't take care of those. It'll take care of the other stuff, though. Those have been exiled. And now Jack's going to make himself a beast yet again. Pass that turn back.
And now he's got his 2 planeswalkers. He's got Crux of Fate in hand to take care of the remains. It's just getting out of this turn.
That's the one.
But still, no guarantee. There's Pulchronos, there's Boon Satyr. There are a chain of cards that Brian could have here to just attack through the defenses Jack has this turn.
He didn't have access to those cards game 1. The ones that you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, Boon Satyr, for example.
Boon Satyr's the new one. I don't know if Brian has it necessarily, but there is a combination of cards he could have to win the game on the spot here. If he doesn't do it this turn, it's going to be hard to do it going forward because Brian's board's going to get swept up next turn, most likely.
What makes it interesting, too, is if you're Brian, what are you going to attack with and where are you attacking? There's a block very quickly. He's attacking Ugin. There's Fleecemane Line. And Fleecemane Line's actually pretty good right now.
Yep. Pretty good against Garruk and Crux of Fate.
Yep. And he's going to Monstrosity this right away. There's a Blossoming Sands. Brian will gain a life. Pass the turn back. So 4/4, indestructible with hexproof. And on this board, pretty good.
Yeah. Again, Brian's doing a pretty impressive job of continuing to play on. Once we've hit the point where it feels like, yeah, the control deck's sort of locking it up, he is still plugging away in this game.
There's Ashiok. Let's take a look at 3. Whisperwood Elementals 1. Elvis Mysticus 2. Genesis Hydras 3. Garruk will tick up. There's a Beast. Pass that turn back.
Now, the Police Main line does not outpace the Garruk, and Jack's got other stuff going on. So Brian's still way behind right now, but given the circumstances, it's pretty impressive that the game's still going on.
Brian still with a Genesis Hydra in hand, mind you. He's going to add a mana. He'll play an Ichthos, so he's got a colorless mana floating. We don't know what that manifest creature is. It's a big secret. Here's a bunch of mana. There's Genesis Hydra. This means a trigger, and we'll look at a bunch of cards. X is 6 here. There's a Courser. Jack may be wondering if I can counter the card that you put in off of that. The answer, of course, is no. You can counter Genesis Hydra, however.
But I think this is just going to be a Crux of Fate response, and then Jack trying to use Garruk and Ashiok to get across the finish line.
Much like what we saw in the last game.
Exactly. It's a little more complicated now because of the Police Main Lion, but Garruk at least treads water with it. Jack can also take a hit or two if he wants to, and Brian's just running out of gas besides.
Fleeceman coming in. It's a freebie. Might as well. There's a block.
And since Jack is probably planning on Crux of Fate anyway, the block is also free.
He was going to try to knock Ashiok down a little bit, but a free block there for Jack, as you did mention.
Again, Jack's pulling away here, but just wants to be careful about this Fleece Main line.
Yeah, it's just very reminiscent of the last game we watched. Windswept Teeth was the manifest creature. Garruk going to tick up. That means it's going to be a Breeze along with it. Here comes Whisper Elemental, which is bringing a manifest creature along with it.
And now with both Garruk and Whisperwood Elemental in play, Jack is comfortably outpacing the Fleece Main Lion.
Yes. Brian going to untap. Time to take a draw step. Fleece Main Lion come in. It's going to go after Garruk. Pretty quick block. One thing for Jack's deck, his manifest cards, well, those will be pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Really no creatures in this deck.
The minute that Brian has to leave the Fleece Main Lion on D, that's the white flag.
Yep.
He can still attack for another turn or two, but if he ever has to say go, that's when he's done for.
The card that Brian can actually find to get himself back into this game, there are very few, but Master of the Unseen is one of them. Here's the attack. Looks like we got ourselves a Garruk emblem, folks.
Yeah, this is not one of Standard's most common emblems,
to say the least. Garruk with his 4 lines of text. Rarely do we see the last one. The target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a creature attacks you, it gets +5/+5 and gains trample in a turn. So chump blocking's hard.
Pretty good combo with a Death Touch creature.
Not bad.
It's like it was designed that way. Pretty sweet also with Whisperwood Elemental, because you just have a steady stream of morphs. That is good deck building. Not that all of these pieces Jack brought to the table himself, mind you. The Ashiok, whatever. It's some sweet synergy.
Hey, you know what? Still good deck building.
Still great deck building.
Didn't win that Grand Prix in Memphis on accident, that's for sure.
Just like Elspeth, what's a good combo with Elspeth tokens? Flying. What's good with Death Touch tokens? Trample. It's like R&D does this kind of stuff on purpose almost.
Here's a Genesis Hydra. Take a look at a bunch of cards here. X is 5. There's a Courser. He'll shuffle up. We'll take a look at the top card here. Yet again. But for Jack Fogle, pretty dominant 2 games here.
Yep. You know, Mastery of the Unseen has given Brian some staying power in these games, but it's also contributed to him playing a later game, which is sort of in Jack's favor regardless of what's happening on the table.
And we can't forget, Brian got off to a great start this game, too. Turn 1 Ellis Mystic, turn 2 Fleece Main Lion, kind of giving the beatdowns, turn 3 Master of the Unseen. But Jack able to stabilize, turn the corner with his Planeswalkers, and then get the job done with a Garruk Emblem. Jack Fogle going to win this match here over Brian Braun-Duin. 2-0. Sultai Control will take care of Green-White Devotion, and for the Grand Prix Memphis champion, off to another great start.
A great opening there for Brian. He just stumbled that one.